Hey team, welcome to episode 154 of Transition Talk, where we talk about dental transitions and how to navigate the sometimes messy path to practice ownership. Picture this. You're a buyer preparing for your first conversation with a seller, and you know this could make or break the deal. Dum dum dum. You've done your initial research, but now you're wondering, what should I actually ask when the conversation starts? What topics matter most? How do I not offend them? In this episode, we'll walk through the key talking points every buyer should hit and how to make a positive, lasting, positive impression on the seller. But before we get into that fun, Mr. Loretto.
Hey, girl.
How are you?
It's been like 1 hour since I've seen you.
We've been spending a lot of time together.
Yes. Meetings.
Meetings upon meetings, but some of the meetings have been good. Your efforts and being an advocate for dental business curriculum is starting to proliferate. So we had tech, and then now let's talk about those other programs.
Yeah, so we expanded that back in 23. We started the Texas Tech El Paso curriculum and started off with 50 students in that first graduating class of 25. And now we're about ready to be introduced to the 27 class. And so that expanded now to Texas A&M here in Dallas. And then it went to the specialty program. And now we've been invited to put the curriculum together for Nebraska. And then we're still involved with Mississippi and, of course, the Hinman meeting in Georgia and, of course, the Dental School of Georgia. So it's a little overwhelming. There's a lot of content. Mm-hmm. It went from, Christy, me and you just traveling around giving this 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour lecture about why to own to now 30, 40, 50, even at Texas Tech, 80 hours of a business curriculum.
Yep.
And so just putting together that content and to make it organized and to be able to make it organized and be able to teach it in a fashion that a science-minded student can understand it's been fun. To be quite honest, it was a little bit of a task to put it all together, and you've been helpful with that project. But now the next chapter is putting together the speaking team that can help us and make that program more robust, because there's just outside speakers that are coming in. So we've been playing around with that for the last few months and looking forward to getting additional speakers trained to be able to speak on all these topics and hopefully expand this educational thought process of helping young students and residents with lots of debt into this ownership, and hoping that some of those lessons that we teach have an impact on their lives.
Yeah, it's been super fun. When we first started this, I was like, they're not going to be interested in like accounting 101. And so like, how do I teach that? But it was very clear after the first few sessions that they were like, oh my gosh, this is super helpful. And there are, of course, people who are like, accounting, whatever, fine. But like each business topic that we talk about, they're hungry for the information. So it's just been really fun. That would have been my alternative profession, is a college professor. I don't know if you knew that about me.
No, I knew that from our interview.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's why I hired you. Yeah, I remember that from your interview because I thought that what we do is teach. Mm-hmm. That's what I learned from the Cane and Cane Waters is we are teachers.
We are teachers.
And we're making a little bit more than a teacher. I'm sorry.
Teachers need more money.
They need more money.
So we'll teach you today about the interview. We have another episode on this content, episode 3. So way back in the day, if you want to hear baby Christy and baby Charles talk, Go to episode 3. But that was focused more on the do's and don'ts. And since then, those are still very applicable, still stand by all of those do's and don'ts. But I would say that we get a lot of questions on the meat of the conversation. Like, what do I actually talk about? How do I ask these questions? I know that buyers are hungry to get more about the opportunity and about the practice and really understand, is this a viable opportunity for me? But if you walk into that interview or that meeting and you come off like a robot just shooting off a bunch of questions, or you ask a question in the wrong way, it can certainly set the wrong tone and it can just kind of feel stilted. So our goal today is to walk through some of the topics that we think you should try to hit if you have an interview. And I'll caveat, it doesn't have to be one interview. A lot of the times you'll meet with a potential seller multiple times. And so you can kind of sprinkle these out, but we'll cover all of them today. So,
one thing I want to say, Christy, is because when you listen to a podcast, it's typically we're walking, we're multitasking. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're not just old school listening to a podcast with like pen and paper. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But, for the listener, I want to remind you that this is quote unquote transcribed as far as the notes. So if you've not gone to the NDP blog and being able to see exactly what some of our content is about, it is there. This is definitely 100% one of those episodes where it'd be really good to go directly to the blog to look and see these questions. This is going to be a tool you can quote unquote print off or create your own checklist of questions when you go on that interview. And I hate to put that pressure on you, but the interview is so important, and being so prepared, because the person, in this case, the interviewer, we're immediately kind of judging. We're looking at perhaps a resume, in this case, a CV, your clinical experience or lack of. And so we're just thinking about everything that you sat at the lobby. We're asking the person, what do you think of her? What do you think of him? Were they late? Did you have any interaction? We're constantly in this mode of what are we going to get? So to be prepared for something like this, along with a set of very appropriate questions, I think it is critical.
I do too.
And it's something where you just cannot take this lightly. I mean, you're $500,000 of debt, and we're going into, in this case, to perhaps a private practice that could lead to an ownership position. I think that it's probably one of the most important interviews you're going to have in your life.
I agree. And if I didn't say this in episode 3, then we'll tack it on here. Don't just write these out and think about them in your head. Say them out loud. Use your spouse, your friend, your mirror. Saying words out loud and actually asking the questions and making sure it feels natural is really important, because we live in our head and then you try to read something or, so being prepared and kind of do some coaching with someone to try before you start this.
One thing to add there is, yes, these are the suggested questions, but also they need to be your questions, because be prepared that the interviewer perhaps does something like, well, what do you mean by that? So at least have some direction and understanding with why you're asking some of these questions, for sure.
Okay. So first topic, I think asking a seller and saying, tell me about the practice you've built, right? Like just opening up with like a general question about the practice overall and getting them to talk. So what are some things that would kind of fall under this bucket of type of question?
Yeah, so let's manage our time. If we've got an hour and a half for the interview, let's start with some very broad questions and let's get that doctor to open up. And remember, you're showing up, you've got pen and paper, you're taking notes and asking permission with that. Yeah, we're starting off with some big picture stuff about the practice you build. And hopefully that could get this doctor talking. Maybe some things that we're trying to get out of this is what's driving the practice. Driving the practice could be lots of things. Could be the new patient flow. We get 30, 40 new patients. We're in a military community base where a lot of those military patients with this insurance. It could be the types of cases perhaps that really drive this practice. That has all to do with the training and perhaps the marketing or the big hygiene practice. Or it just could be good old Crown and Bridge, 7, 8 new patients, and maybe they don't really expand on that. But we're trying to get them to talk about what's making the thing work, the success that they're having, the type of practice. So big, giant picture, what's built this thing, right?
Yep.
What's making it work?
Absolutely. And I think their answers to those big questions will drive follow-up questions, right? And so that allows you to ask the question, like if they say, hey, it's a big military base, or there's a few big corporations that moved in and we got a new influx of patients. Oh, really? Well, like what insurance is that? Like, do you take that insurance? Or it allows you to kind of start asking some follow-up questions about those bigger pieces.
Yeah, and I think that you're trying to figure out, navigate that conversation into what that clinical philosophy could be. That's such a big, broad question.
That's a big question.
That every dentist is going to have kind of a road
Opinion.
Of where they went and their philosophical training and who they were mentored by. So get them to obviously talk about that, which natural follow-up questions are there is the training in CE that perhaps that they have received. That great open-ended question now to talk about kind of the opportunity. What additional training and opportunity or maybe CE do you think someone like me would be able to invest in that would be able to serve your patients? Okay, so when you're in that interview, you want that interviewer to be thinking about you. And so it's natural for you to say that if I were to be in this practice with you, Christy, or we working together in that associateship, show that confidence in that type of conversation and lead this interview. It may be perceived as you're going to be interviewed, but this is actually a reverse where we want you to take that lead.
Yeah, and I think the answers to the clinical philosophy or these bigger picture questions also allow you to understand what you may need to highlight about your own skill set, right? if a doctor is super passionate about their hour-long new patient visits and spending that time chairside with them and going through that, then maybe your demeanor and how you connect with patients and kind of how you feel about that is maybe really important to talk about. Or maybe they are really, really clinical and they want to talk about certain procedures, then maybe your ability or trainings that you have already done related to those procedures might allow you to kind of have a connection, right? Again, you're trying to figure out what matters to this person who has built this beautiful business. What do I need to know about the business? But also, like, what would entice them to think of me? And how do I start making those connection points?
Yeah. So back on that philosophy, back on the CE, it is your job to interview to figure out what training this person has done, period. Mm-hmm. And so that way you're leading that conversation with, I know that you trained at Spear, Kois, or Pankey. I know you went through this. I know that you, according to the website, you got this implantology recognition back in 2007. Explain to me on the practice, like the number of patients that you might see in a certain month in that. Two things. You have a passion to do that and you're not trained, or that you've already doing those trainings. Or if it's they're referring out these types of patients, being able to incorporate, okay, that's great because that is something that I am trained in or have a passion to be trained in.
Yeah, absolutely. It highlights opportunities for you as a potential new owner as well.
Yeah.
That leads to the patients. Clearly, I know and you know from this line of business that when someone is looking to transition, I just want to take care of my patients and staff. And so really focusing on those two topics, I think as part of this interview is really important. And so tell me about your patient base. Tell me about the community. What are we hoping to gain from those types of questions beyond the obvious, getting them to talk?
Yeah, I mean, they love their patients. It is something that's really important to them. So it's just an opportunity. It's almost like asking someone about their family. They are going to open up, and we'll talk about team here in a second, but those patients are going to be something they're going to want to expand upon. I mean, sure, you can ask some detailed questions about the age. Is it newer family? Is it more of your kind of 40 to 60 group? Is there a unique demographic where you're dealing with much more of a senior population because maybe this dentist, the seller is maybe in their 70s. They've had kind of that patient for a long time. You're just trying to think about the patients that you are easily connected to. You're going to figure out, in this case, if you were in dental school as a D2, that you love 5-year-olds or 80-year-olds or you don't. You're going to figure out the types of procedures that you enjoy doing and kind of where those fit. So it's really just getting that doctor to kind of open up about something important, again, these patients. Even on the practice, I want to make sure that when you download the blog, there's going to be more questions here. I want you to be thinking about some open questions that if the doctor doesn't expand, when we're talking back about the practice, I want to think about, have there been any major changes? It could be in technology. It could be employee changes. We could have questions on the consistency of the practice and growth, the procedure mix and things that are referred out. So I want this blog to be really important as a good tool. And some of these questions that we have kind of as a group decided to be, I think, relevant to the fact gathering of the practice, they don't have to come out in the interview. Mm-hmm. This could be follow-up questions that we have post-interview, and that could be where you have this list of quote-unquote questions, but we can come back afterwards and say, would it be okay? I know that we're getting short on time for me to follow up with an email, which is simply some additional questions about the practice. And then, if appropriate, even some of the financials. Okay. Yeah. So this is the interview, build that relationship so that we can ask for more, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we talk about the team, clearly another very important component of this, I think it's completely okay to just ask a very open question to start of like, tell me about your team. You know, who are they? If you don't know this, if maybe they don't have a thorough website, or maybe you haven't been able to opine that from your initial diligence, how long have they been with you? You can even acknowledge something that's probably every owner who's listening to this and is out there. I know staffing can be a challenge. Like, tell me about your team. Tell me about what are they like? And they probably will be an open book in our experience about who they are.
Yeah, I just have the doctor just kind of walk through kind of the departments, kind of front and back office by team, and just seeing them kind of light up about these individual employees. And I definitely, if the website is updated and they have all the employees listed, to go ahead and have that prepared and break that in by department. So when you do talk about the team, go ahead and point out, hey, I know that Joellen and Christy are kind of your key team members, and it looks like she's been here this or she does this. And so certainly want to hear about them first. Something where it could be a spouse that's listed on the same last name. Obviously, it could be the spouse being the office manager. How active is Susie in the practice? I believe being a spouse, sometimes they could be heavily involved and sometimes they could just come in and do some things, kind of after hours. So getting that, and then also just talk about leadership qualities that they have. Talk about getting them to share things to the nature of definitely this is her strength, and then any challenges from a team perspective, shortage or just team member that has some challenges. Could be being on time, it could be attitude, things like that. We're definitely in a tough environment where keeping everybody happy is challenging. So this is a nice way to say everybody's experiencing it. Give me the goods on Susie. If she's having a bad day, I want to hear about it.
Yep. And I think that from a team and from a patient perspective, it's a great question to say, what qualities would someone need to be a good fit for your patients? What qualities or what traits would make someone a good fit for your team? You're not asking them to grade you on the spot. If you said this in a different way, you could be like, do you think I'd be a good fit? That's super awkward. So I think asking it in a way that allows them to kind of think about just what type of person without it being you is a great way to kind of get more information too. And I'll say, we're going to shift to some other topics. I could easily see just the high level overview, tell me about your team, tell me about your patients, taking up an entire interview. So you can always follow up. Don't break the flow of an interview to, I've got to ask this question about the building, or I need to ask this question. Let it come later. So with that, the building is oftentimes a really important component of a transition. Seller might own it or seller might lease it, right? And so I think if you're in the practice, if you go and do an interview and you're there, some of these things might not be applicable. If you meet them at a diner or at a coffee shop or something like that, and you've never been in the space, then you can certainly kind of talk about some of the more operational, like number of chairs, number of quiet rooms, what is the equipment like? So what are your thoughts on the building and space?
Yeah, you want to think about yourself. You want to think about the growth of the practice. You want to think if it's a general practice and hygiene. You want to think about expansion. You want to think about if you have a spouse that's going to come to the practice. Associate, is it just a lease space that we're going to work in for a few years, or is it a building? These are just super important to physically see. And then certainly this is their house. Even if it's outdated and even it's this and that, it's just find something to compliment them on. And then it's a perfect time to ask them when they're there. Obviously, it could be less than 10 years remodeled and awesome to it's been over 20 years. If it's the over 20-year scenario, just ask them frankly, what are the opportunities here just from a technology standpoint and additional chairs you could add? What are some things, if you said, I got 10, 20 more years of doing this, that perhaps you might invest back in the practice? What are those things?
I think that's a great way to ask it.
It's important to get them to honestly say, hey, I would probably fix this in a nice way.
Or I might add a chair, and this office is too big, and I've always thought it could take another chair here, right? That's an easy thing that someone might have thought, but I don't want to make the investment because I know I only have 5 years left or something.
Yeah, this CAD CAM is working and functional, but it's 7 years old. I might upgrade it. This piece of technology is working, but hey, I could upgrade it to this piece of technology. You're getting that doctor to basically say, hey, here's my house. AC is 20 years old and the roof is 20 years old. And so I know when you probably buy it, there's probably a good chance you may ask for some concessions. Remember, when we're purchasing a practice, concessions is not necessarily price. There's lots of different things that we can get concessions on. It's a different episode. Right now, we're just trying to get the doctor to open up about the practice, about the team, about the patients. But in this case, for the building, we're thinking about other things. Could be the landlord. It could be where do the patients park? Is there plenty of parking? It could be signage. Is there a building? Is it for sale? That's something we want to invest in as well. Is that something they're willing to maybe part with, or maybe they want to sell the practice but hold on for some real estate income? We've talked about that as well in other episodes. This interview is just kind of some quick hit pieces. And I really think I like your advice, Christy, with this is a list. I certainly don't want to cut people off. I do think that if there was an allotted time, an hour and a half of this interview, I think even showing that doctor, hey, I came prepared and I maybe become over prepared. I actually have 8 different topics that I was going to ask you today. And all that does for the interviewer is to now, hey, we're past the time. I know you had 6 or 7 topics. I think we've just talked about one topic. What other things did you have? And so now that it becomes a much more engaging conversation where they're saying, well, what else do you want to know?
Yeah.
And then now you can go through some of those. And then if it gets to the point where it's a little too much, then that's where the follow-up would take place.
Absolutely. And there are other topics that might come out in those initial questions, like marketing is another area that I think that you can kind of look at 2 ways. Maybe that comes out when you're talking about patients and what makes this practice so special, because you talk about new patients and how we get patients. Maybe it's that they're patient-based. There's a lot of internal referrals, and that's where most of their patients come from, and that's what makes it special. Or you might have looked online and you see that they have a ton of Google reviews, or they have a really big TikTok or Instagram presence, or you might see that they have none of that. And I think that should guide your questions. If it's clear that they don't have a website, they're not doing a lot for marketing, they've never mentioned anything, you don't even have to ask about marketing, right? But if it's hey, they've got a great TikTok, like, hey, I noticed your TikTok. It's hilarious. I love it. Do you get a lot of patients from that? Or is that just something you and your team enjoy doing, right? To understand, like, how important is this? Is this actually like something they're doing to get patients and retain patients? Or is this just the fun outlet for the team to have a good time and it doesn't hurt?
I think of this when we're talking about marketing in 2 different ways. If I'm thinking about a practice I'm purchasing and it's a smaller practice like $600,000, there's more than likely going to be zero marketing, internal, external. If I'm thinking about it from the perspective of I'm an associate and going to go in as a partner, and new patient flow and the increase of the business is like number one thing, I might spend some time on here.
Yep.
To
100%.
talk about,
Good point.
the success that they're having internal and externally, because I want to be able to see and have answers to that new patient flow that's going to justify me coming in as the associate. So this is be one of those things where, depending on the size of the practice, and it's a walk-away sell, that I may spend some more time on maybe in the due diligence.
100% agree. Another topic, and probably the last major topic we would talk about here, is the actual transition, right? So if it is very clear that they are wanting to sell 100% or they're wanting to bring you on as a partner, I think understanding, and you haven't had a lot of conversations about the transition itself, the interview can be a good time to kind of open the door to that conversation, okay? It's important that it is not targeted, direct questions that require them to give you specific answers, because if they are not far into their journey, they may not have all the answers, and that can make someone feel uncomfortable. But I think asking, what would be your goal in a transition? Or what is your ideal transition look like? That is a big enough question for you to gauge how much they've thought about it and what matters, and maybe what they haven't thought about that might pose an issue for you or for the transition.
And I know we talked about maybe being able to skip over some things. This is one I don't skip over, because this is, are we going to go on a second date?
Yeah.
This question to me is critical. I think that you've taken notes through this whole interview, and we've gotten through a lot of these areas from the team and the building and the patients, et cetera. But we have to close. The close is always, how do we get to the next meeting? And so being able to open up that with, I know that this is the largest decision you're probably making. It's probably one of the largest decisions I'm making. As you consider transitioning your practice, you consider being an associate, transitioning 100%, I would love to hear just that vision, that perfect timeline of things. How do you see this? If you thought about a team that maybe would help execute this, but really just even timelines, and just get them to open up. And this is a very important time to take those notes, especially when they say things like, well, maybe over the next 5 years. That's a long time, and it's very broad. To definitely would like to sell the practice in the next year. Whatever that is, we're writing down, and can you expand on that?
Yep.
Then from there, does that match basically what you're looking for? The mentorship, the timing for you, the size of practice, the location. It just needs to match kind of your long-term vision. And depending on obviously the size of the practice, it could be a larger practice, but we need to incorporate them back in the practice. If we've asked and gone down those roads, they're doing all these clinical procedures that you can't do, then of course we need them there. And we need them to be there for at least a year, and they're saying they're ready to sell the whole thing, and here's the keys and the coat, but yet I can't do those clinical procedures. So there's a thought process of why we're asking these questions, because we're building up to now, how does it work in the transition? And does that meet kind of your transition goals and expectations? So certainly good closing questions. And then ultimately, where do we go from here? What is our next meeting and appointment that we can go ahead and put on the schedule? And would you mind, after this meeting, my ability to recap some of the notes and what we discussed, some of the things you shared with me, as well as some additional questions I wasn't able to get to. And then that leads to, and if you feel comfortable, your ability to be able to share some of the financials of the practice with me, as I have a team already kind of put together to be able to come help review these. And they know my transition goals, and just kind of want to stand by that I would grab this information, share with them. And so I'm just anxious to get into ownership in a reasonable amount of time. And I love everything you shared. And I think I would be a great fit.
Yep.
Okay. You've recapped everything. You expressed your interest to move forward with the next meeting, expressed your interest to be an owner, and you've even letting them know that you've got a team built up basically behind you to support you through that process.
Yep. And I would add that if for whatever reason there's not going to be an opportunity for a second meeting, everything Charles just said is accurate. You know, you wouldn't ask for the second meeting, and you might consider ending with like a kind of final question of just, you know, hey, what advice would you give a new owner if you could go back in time 20 years and kind of do some things over? What would you do again? What would you not do again? What different move might you make? You're not asking them to talk about you. You're asking them for some advice. And I think Charles and I joke, but like as we get older, we just want to give all the advice and help and mentor. And I just think it shows some reflection. And I think it shows some maturity of saying, hey, I know I'm not going to do everything right, and I'm looking for advice from you. So I think if you have a final wrap-up question, I would try to make it something like that.
You know what it is? I feel like you actually close with that. I like your strategy better. Let's get the appointment on the books, but then we're going to end with a little something different. Okay, so the appointment is scheduled.
We're providing options here.
Appointment is scheduled. It's your close, but you're not letting them go yet.
Yeah.
And one more question. I got one more question.
Yeah.
What would you advise this young person, knowing what you know and all the 25 years or 30 years of training? What's the one or two or three things that you would advise me? Clinically, it could be financially, a consultant, moving fee for anything. What would you tell me?
Yeah, I think that gives both of you, hopefully, a very positive note to end on.
It's a very relaxed close. It's just something natural that you can kind of smile. And it's almost like your whole posture is changing. We're just hanging out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this hopefully is helpful as you look to interview and go explore these practice opportunities. I know that they can be scary and they can be challenging, but I think like anything in life, the right preparation, the right thought, the right research, the right data can help you do anything. So go back and listen to episode 3, do's and don'ts. How do we prep for it? How do we follow up? Some of what Charles spoke about today is in there. And then clearly the content of what you're going to talk about is what's going to be remembered. So that's all we have for today, team. Thanks for joining us on episode 154 of Transition Talk. As always, make sure to share the love with those who may not know of us yet. And of course, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time.
That was fun. Thanks, Christy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.